Hello and welcome to the West Ham Breakdown, an Analytics United production. And today I am joined by Darcy Cox. I don't know why I called it an Analytics United production. I'm not sure I usually do that. It's very giving like 20th Century Fox or Warner Brothers or something. So, but we'll run with it. We'll run with it. It is a well-oiled machine over here. So I think we're only right to do that. But yeah, we're coming today to discuss the Bournemouth game, 2-2 draw at the weekend in the lovely sunny London Stadium. It was a glorious day. It was nice to be there. The performance maybe not not matching the weather. I think some definite positives which we're going to go into, but also some definite negatives that made for a particularly frustrating first half. But ultimately, I think a point, as we'll discuss, is probably a fair result. I think both teams can be pretty happy with that. Both teams will probably feel slightly robbed as well. But yeah, all in all, it feels fair. Before we go into it, I should say we're going to discuss, obviously, the first and second half. I think that's probably the best way for us to frame it this week because of just how distinct both halves were. And then we'll come on to chat about sort of the return. It feels like an arrival, really, of Niclas Füllkrug, frankly, but the return of Niclas Füllkrug and what having an actual number 9 might do in the third section of the pod. But Darcy, I'll give it to you quickly to just give us a 1-minute overview of sort of how you felt about the game and yeah, where you're at after Saturday.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of, I guess, negativity around the game, and I think it's maybe sort of like a misunderstanding of where Bournemouth are and just how good Bournemouth have been. We talked about it on PMP, about like near enough in the data, the 4th or 5th best attack in the league, and then one of the best defences as well. So for us to deliver a 2-2, and outside of, I don't want to put the goal completely down to mistakes from them or from us, sorry, but really the two big chances we gave up were down to individual errors or errors at some point in the build-up. And I'm quite happy for us to come out of a game with Bournemouth, a game against Bournemouth, sorry, with a point, because it's really not what I expected at all. I think Bournemouth are a really tough nut to crack. I don't think many teams have actually sort of passed the Bournemouth test with flying colours, and neither did we, but we did a really good job, and I just didn't think we were at that stage yet. So yeah, I think I agree with you. There still were elements of the performance that I wasn't happy with, and we'll go into those in a bit more detail. But I actually think there should be a little bit more of, I don't know, a positive vibe after that.
Yep.
It's Bournemouth. They're playing really, really well. They're one of the most physical teams, and on the whole, I think we dealt with it really quite impressively.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, people, I guess, will highlight the fact that they were coming into it in a relatively bad run of form, but also they've been contending with a lot of serious injuries. They've also had a cup run recently, which means that minutes have to be managed, and Premier League form might suffer because a cup run to a side like Bournemouth is a lot. It means a lot, and they probably would have focused on that a bit more, and probably rightly so, actually, from the way I'm looking at it. But yeah, I agree with you, Darcy. I think, yes, it was frustrating at times, but I think for the most part, bar those mistakes, we looked pretty solid. I think we kept the ball pretty well. And yeah, all things considered, I think, yeah, you can be pretty happy with it. I think Bournemouth present quite a lot of threats to a lot of teams this season, but also they're quite well equipped to be quite dangerous against us specifically. I think when you look at sort of where our weaknesses lie and what their strengths are, and I think, yeah, all in all, we did a pretty good job of handling it, whether their form was great or not. One thing I will say before we jump into the first half, I think one thing I wanted to address, just because it feels remiss of me not to address it, but I was in the ground on Saturday. It was very flat in the first half, it really was, and the fellas who were sat next to me who do the sort of audio commentary for partially sighted fans commented that, rightly so, that after the first half, I think it was almost certainly going to be the last game on Match of the Day. And then the second half came and it really did liven up. But one thing that we did see twice on 2 occasions was some booing from the fans, which just frustrates the hell out of me. Like, the first half was boring, sure, but I think it was fine. I think the booing was uncalled for. The more flagrant one, I would say, is booing Mavropanos when he comes on. Like, I get it. I get that some fans don't like him. He's mistake prone. That is a fact. I also think he's been pretty solid this season when he's come in, to be honest. I think people are punishing him for things that they assume but aren't necessarily based on his recent form. I think when he has played, he's looked fine. Yes, he does have that one mistake in him, but I think the data shows as well that he's actually had a pretty good season when he has been able to play. But none of that should really matter. I think the fact of the matter is he is a West Ham player. He's coming on to do a job for West Ham. I don't think anyone can suggest that he doesn't put his all in and put his effort in. I think part of the issue is probably that he puts too much effort in sometimes, and it can lead to some crazy decision making. But yeah, I just think it's not very West Ham, or it's not what I like to think of West Ham as. I think generally we're a club that are very proud to get behind our players, whether they're good or bad. They're West Ham, and that's kind of what I always admired about West Ham. And to see us boo a player before he's even come on, before he's even had the chance to do something bad, I just think it's ridiculous. So I wanted to address that because I just think it's just not a good vibe at all. And also, how can you expect him to play a good 30 minutes if the first interaction he has on the day is to be booed? Like, he's going to have that effect in his performance the whole way through. So yeah, I would just say, from my point of view, if we can from now on just get behind him while he's still a West Ham player, that would really be much appreciated. But let's get stuck into it then, Darcy. Let's start with the first half. And I think one thing I wanted to say is that a lot's been made so far this season, but since Potter arrived, certainly, about what he's been able to do in a short space of time. And a lot in particular has been made about sort of becoming more solid. We've talked about how we limited Bournemouth, and we'll go into more detail on that. But something that I think we maybe haven't discussed quite as much because we haven't seen it quite so often is retention. We all knew that Potter was probably going to come in and implement a possession-based style of football. I think in part because of the run of fixtures we had since he arrived, and in part because of the confidence levels of the squad. We didn't see that straight away. The focus was very much on, let's sit deep, let's shut up shop, let's limit the opposition, let's hit them on the break. And I think today, against a very well-drilled Bournemouth side that are very good at pressing and play a very intense pressing approach that they've become famous for under Iraola, I think we retained the ball really, really well. I think it was probably the most comfortable I've seen us in possession, in terms of contributions from the centre-backs, in terms of being able to find the midfielders and come through from the first phase into the second phase of build-up quite effectively. And yeah, I feel like this is another building block that's been added to the sort of stable foundations that Potter's built, and a large part of the reason why I still feel quite positive moving out of this game. And I guess all of that fundamentally is down to the fact that we did build in a structure that enabled the midfielders to drop in and facilitate a little bit more. There was less gaps and it was easier to access them. I wonder sort of how you felt about that, Darcy. Is that something that you saw as well, or am I maybe sort of got my rose-tinted spectacles on and trying to find some positives?
No, there was definitely it was definitely a good in possession first half, I think. Obviously we didn't go with the 5-3-2. I think that's the biggest change from the off. Yep. We built in or at least our in possession structure was a 4-2-3-1. And I liked that Potter kept that midfield that I keep calling codependent together, but adjusted it so that their profiles all fit quite well. And I think the balance between the three was nice. You had Souček as the attacking midfielder, and that's because really I think in that kind of three, what he offers best is verticality, whether that's by being an outlet higher up the pitch, so you can play a longer ball, or you can look to play a progressive pass into him, or it's by like forward runs or runs beyond the ball. And to offer those two things, he has to be highest in the midfield three, right? And then James Ward-Prowse, he also offers progression and verticality, but he does it via passing. So instead of having him attacking mid, you need to have him deeper in the pivot, as Potter has been using him up until now. Then you had Alvarez in there, who was more circulation focused, and he was doing exactly what you said along with James Ward-Prowse. He was dropping a bit deeper to basically negate the press from Bournemouth. And I thought we handled those moments really well. When Bournemouth did come to press, what we were often doing was starting in the 4-2 with our build-up. Bournemouth would come out and press in their usual 4-4-2, sorry. But then one of James Ward-Prowse or Edson Alvarez would drop into the back line, whether that was between the centre-backs or into a wide centre-back spot, sorry.
Spot. Interesting.
and then essentially we create a 3v2 against their two pressing forwards. And that meant that we could retain the ball really well. I don't think we found it too hard once we worked out that we could just do that. And at times, Bournemouth even sort of stopped pressing, stopped initiating their press so aggressively, which I think is like kind of a small win in itself to do that to one of the best pressing teams in Europe. And yeah, you're right. It's a very good step in the right direction, and I didn't necessarily think we were ready for that, at least with that midfield.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think Alvarez in particular looked pretty decent to me in the first half. In a first half that was pretty dull, it was nice to see him doing that. And I think it's a lot of the stuff. It's funny to say, isn't it? But it's a lot of the stuff we sort of expected to happen under Lopetegui in terms of two centre backs being joined by a midfielder, creating that three, and then playing into the second phase with the midfielders and the wing backs. I think the issue under Lopetegui was that those gaps between those lines was so exaggerated, that the midfielders were always so far away or the wing backs were always so high and wide, that it actually made it a lot more difficult for the three players at the back to then access those players. I think what Potter has kind of done is shrunk the pitch a little bit. It feels like all those connections and networks of players and triangles have all just come a little bit closer together. There was one spell, I can't remember where, it was definitely in the first half, but there was one spell where we played, I think it was about 8 one-touch passes just around the back and played straight through the press, and a lot of that was around sort of Alvarez, Paquetá picking up that sort of more relationist thing, which I think we talked about in the preview podcast, actually, in terms of him having the freedom to just roam around the pitch. Even if he's ostensibly a left winger, he can drift over all the way onto the right-hand side of the pitch if that's where possession is. And if any of you would like to listen to what we think we should do in the next game, which I believe is Liverpool away this weekend.
Yeah.
We will be recording the preview show as we do every week for every game, and you can go and listen to that at our Patreon site, patreon.com/analyticsunited, and you can sign up with a 7-day free trial. So if you only want to know about how we're going to play against Liverpool and then never listen to us again, you do have that freedom. But I would advocate that you go over there and check it out. And we'll also be doing the Extra Time show, which I think is a good place to say that whilst we will touch on individuals in this show today, we will be doing our usual individual performance review in Extra Time as well, where we'll talk about, I would imagine, every single one of the midfielders, because they all had some real talking points, both good and bad, and those that came off the bench as well. But yeah, there's a little plug for the Patreon. But I think we were good at the back. We were decent in the middle third, but I would say a lot of the issues still came in the final third. In the first half, we didn't create, frankly. I think we created 0.05 XG in the end, which for 45 minutes of football to create one poor quality chance is not great. But I think a lot of that was that, certainly from where I was sat and watching the game, it felt very one-dimensional when we got to a point where we could access the final third. Everything basically wanted to go down the right-hand side because that's where Kudus was, it's where Wan-Bissaka was, and there were so many times, even though we did access them sometimes, where Skulls would be miles in space out on the left side, and if we'd have just played it back to the centre-back who could have hit a switch, we would have been bombing down there, and I think there was too much urgency to go down our strongest side, which is so easy to do when your best players are there. But I think having a bit of balance is going to be key if we're going to create anything, because it's so much easier for Bournemouth to defend if they know that they can just basically commit everyone to that side almost before we've even done it, because they can preempt it.
Yeah, the attack really lacked. I think variety is probably the right word. We were able to penetrate into the final third down the right just fine, even though Bournemouth knew we were doing that, just because we had the quality there. We've got such a good build-up unit down the right with Todibo, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and then Kudus as well. It's hard to deal with for anyone. But when we got to the final third, you really felt that that basically the way we'd set up was so unbalanced that everyone wanted to shift play towards the right. So you said Skulls was pushing high, and that allows Paquetá to basically roam, and what he'd do is come into the centre of the pitch, but his body position wasn't to receive and then turn out. He was getting the ball and then he was trying to play like a final pass in behind through the right hand side. When you play Bowen up top, you're just always going to get this natural right hand side bias because he wants to move out there. And then you've already mentioned Kudus and Aaron Wan-Bissaka are two best take on players, both against the same fullback as well. All of our potential was down the right-hand side, and it just meant that we had zero attacking variety. And I think you said the number there, 0.05 expected goals created in the first half. So yeah, I get why fans are unhappy with that kind of outcome. because it's not ideal if you can do the first two phases and then you get to the final phase and you're basically like, we could maybe cross it, but even if we cross it, there's no one in there. Like you have no outlet to hit. I know the idea is Souček is supposed to be breaking into the box, and that's why he's attacking midfield. But he can only be in so many places at once. He's also coming out to the right hand side, so we have a more direct option to build up through as well. And yeah, it just felt, I don't want to say toothless, because there were some dangerous moments, I think, but they were sort of like, they weren't even dangerous moments. They were like, oh, we could have got you there, but we didn't, because we messed up the execution or something. So yeah, I think on the whole, in possession, sort of positive phase 1, positive phase 2, phase 3 definitely lacking a little bit.
Yeah, and I think one of my biggest frustrations was that I think that a couple of the moments that I can think of that probably were more promising for West Ham in the first half did actually come when we managed to attack down the left. I think there was a couple moments where Scar's got played in behind. I managed to get onto the end of them, and yes, sure, the final ball wasn't perfect, but there were chances where I think he won a corner and that sort of thing. It was clear that there was potential down that side. I think it's just that naturally you're going to look towards Kudus ahead of Scarles, because Kudus is Kudus and Scarles is Scarles, and that's just how the squad dynamic works. You're always going to try and go through your best player, but I think, as you say, a bit of variety would help. Also, I was just looking at from the moment I saw the lineup, it's like, would I rather try and exploit Adam Smith or Milos Kerkez based on the current form? It's like you're going into a much harder battle against Kirk. No disrespect to Adam Smith, like obviously a very impressive footballer who's managed to cut it in the Premier League for some time at Bournemouth. Despite his age, he's still getting into that lineup. So yeah, no disrespect to him at all, but you would have fancied yourself running at or in behind Adam Smith a lot more than Kerkez based on the form that he's exhibited this season, both in and out of possession. I think everyone knows about what a threat he is in terms of his assists and sort of his delivery into the box, but I think what's underappreciated massively is how good he is in 1v1 defensive situations as well. He's got such an engine on him. He's so good at tracking back, almost in a Wan-Bissaka-esque way. Like, he'll leave a lot of space, but he'll cover the ground quickly enough to get back and make those crucial interventions. But then when you're sort of standing him up 1v1, it's a pretty tricky battle for Kudus, and I know Kudus is one of the best dribblers in the league, but I think even you see it in the first 45 minutes, right? Kerkez does have his number on a couple of occasions, and I think there's a few moments where Kudus manages to break in behind, but one of them was almost accidental, where he sort of fumbled the ball ahead, and then unfortunately we didn't make anything of it. But yeah, it was just a bit of a frustrating first half, mainly because I think there was so much opportunity to get into the final third, but we just looked, yeah, as you say, toothless might be a bit strong, but certainly a little lackluster. So we've done, I think, the best part of 15 minutes about all of the things that we did in possession, and sort of how none of it actually led to anything, because we were not great in the final third. But we should give some time to talk about our out of possession approach. And Jack would frankly kill me if I didn't do this, because this is his whole thing, his out of possession loving. So yeah, we'll put some time in here to discuss that in the first half. And my general takeaway is that whilst we were once again very good at defending deep areas, I think we were really good defending our wide areas. I think we defended the box well. I think we limited them as much as we didn't create anything. I don't think they really created anything themselves either, bar obviously a big Areola mistake where he palms the shot out and it's an easy goal for Evanilson. But I think in terms of disrupting them, I don't think we really did any of that effectively. I think our press was fairly ineffective. I think Bournemouth found solutions quite easily to help play through. I think Lewis Cook was a big part of that. I was sat next to the Bournemouth analysts watching this game, and the amount of times I heard them go, "Go on, Cookie, go on, Cookie." And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Guy was covering so much ground, and I think that gave our midfield a lot to think about. But yeah, I mean, it's always difficult coming out of a game where you've watched it quite intently for 90 minutes and you have your assumptions. But Darcy, I know you'll have watched it back a bit more than I have, certainly, and I just wonder if my assumptions about our out of possession approach being slightly disconnected are fair, or if that was just sort of maybe the crowd's frustrations getting into my system and making me angry.
No, definitely fair. I think Bournemouth, is credit to Bournemouth really, because they were able to create quite I guess, quite a lot of difficulty in how we approach the press. I think we already know that our players aren't necessarily in tune enough with what we're doing out of possession to adjust on the fly. And Bournemouth made moments where they would have to do that, and what they did basically was push two of their midfielders really, really high. We looked to press in a 4-4-2, and then when both of our centre forwards, so Bowen and Souček in the first half, made their jumps off of the midfielder to go out to the centre backs, it isolated our midfield three versus two, and that led to two different things in the first half. The first was like the fractured or empty midfield, something we saw under Lopetegui quite often. So our pivot players, Alvarez and James Ward-Prowse, were pinned really deep by two of Bournemouth's midfielders pushing really high. Then what Bournemouth would do is they play out from the back, they bait both of our centre forwards to go and press, and it would mean that no one is marking the deepest Bournemouth midfielder, and that distance for one of our midfielders to go and jump, because the other two Bournemouth midfielders are so high, is massive. They're in a 3v2 essentially, because both of our centre forwards have gone. And what it meant is there were some moments where the midfield, it might have not been empty, but it felt very empty, because James Ward-Prowse was like out on the left channel. Alvarez was between like jumping to Tyler Adams or leaving the attacking midfielder. And they were just caught between the three. And then the other scenario that happened quite a few times was our centre forwards became outnumbered. So they had the two centre backs and the goalkeeper. And just by playing it between them, a lot of the time they were able to just generate a passing angle to go from centre back to goalkeeper and then back to centre back. And then that centre back could turn. And because their midfield was so high, just had a load of space to run into. And I think that was a lot of the story of the first half. That's really the image I remember of the first half, is like Dean Howson just carrying up the left into space, and Souček sort of like labouredly trying to get back to get alongside him. Like you said, in deeper areas, defended really well. Alvarez in particular, I was really impressed with how he covered the wide areas. But yeah, the press, I think, still needs a little bit of work. Luckily, it didn't lead to too much, and we were a lot better in the second half. But yeah, definitely something to put a note in or put a pin in for training, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I think this game really, from Bournemouth's point of view, just highlighted how impactful a goalkeeper who's comfortable with the ball at his feet can be to a side that wants to try and play through a press. I think Kepa, so much has been, for someone who's really not even that old, so much has been made of Kepa throughout his career, because he's been in the headlines for so many different reasons. But I think ultimately he's a pretty solid keeper, and certainly with the ball at his back, I think alongside House and Zabani, even Senesi when he came on, just looked so comfortable just putting his studs on the ball, even if he's like 2 yards from his goal line. Whereas I think you see that moment where Areola comes almost to the halfway line and nearly loses the ball and gets intercepted. It's like just the sort of huge gap between two profiles. But yeah, enabling it all from the back was Kepa, and yeah, Dean Howson, just before we wrap this section up, what a player. Again, someone who's had a lot said about him this season. I expect that at some point Bournemouth will sell him for a very pretty penny. But yeah, just watching him play in person was incredibly impressive. And I think one thing that I really didn't know about him was just how quick he is. His ability to just eat up ground in transition, like just running back to his own goal. I was like, there was a moment where Bowen was through in behind. I was like, yes, Bowen's going to have the pace here. And then Howson just, I don't even know how, just even because Bowen had such a head start, but Howson was just like, yeah, sound, I'll get that. And just gobbled up the ground and managed to get it out and turn around and then play out again. So yeah, was very impressed by him. As I was with a lot of the Bournemouth players, actually. I think Semenyo was okay. I think Ouattara was okay. I think Evanilson was fantastic. But yeah, I think evidence of a good run club, right? They're going to have a lot of money coming their way, I think, when they sell 2 or 3 of those players for north of £50 million. But we should leave it there for the first half. I think it makes sense to come and discuss sort of all of that again in the second half, because a lot of it changed. It was like watching 2 different games, actually. A very boring first half where neither team really were able to create a great deal of anything, bar, as we say, the Areola mistake, which led to the biggest chance of the half. Second half, completely different, much more open. Both teams much more potent in attack. And frankly, just a much more exciting game to watch. Way more of a spectacle. And yeah, I think it was nice to sort of hear the fans galvanised in the second half after that second goal. The atmosphere really, really flipped. It actually was quite loud in the stadium, which is not something that I've been able to say too often over the last few years. But yeah, we'll come back and discuss that, because I think there are some real interesting things to get stuck into. So we'll put a break in there and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, so as promised, second half, way more exciting, lots of change, and I think the biggest change for me that I was incredibly pleased to see was that Potter at half-time addressed the right-hand side bias that we highlighted there in the first half. A lot, if not all, of our attack was going down the right, and I think it made life so much easier for Bournemouth and made life so much more difficult for us, because we were just trying the same thing over and over again with the same results, which were not positive. And then it all changed. Bowen goes out to his preferred right-hand side. Paquetá goes up top. Kudus goes out onto the left. Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot more fun. It was a lot more positive, and the variety that we felt was really lacking, came. And then it got even better, because Paquetá, as much as I love the bloke, really did struggle against Howson. And who can blame him? Because even the best strikers in the league have struggled against him this season. And then we finally saw Füllkrug come on. What an impact. What an impact. I don't want to get too excited. I don't want to jump the gun too soon. But I think it was clear for everyone to see that if he can stay fit and if he can stick around and make those sorts of contributions, he might actually be as good as we all hoped he was going to be when he arrived.
Yeah, it was a big. I mean, we already got a little bit better just by changing that front line.
Yeah.
But the trade-off for Lucas Paquetá coming out of centre forward, moving into 10, and then putting Füllkrug up top, genuinely night and day. Just it sounds strange, and it's a weird thing, I guess, to think about. But there's so much difference between a centre-back or a centre-back winning a duel versus Bowen versus winning a duel versus Niclas Füllkrug, because even if they win the duel against Niclas Füllkrug, they've probably had to battle to win that. They've then executed their header off balance, and then you've got a chance to go and compete. And little things like that, meaning that we can actually go and retain the ball, just started happening straight away. We were actually able to win some second balls. We weren't just kind of giving free aerials to Bournemouth. And that's just like sort of the basic stuff.
Yeah.
You then get into like his little one-touch play, kind of linking everything together. Suddenly, everyone's got a focal point to work off. I'm trying to be careful and not say too much, because I know we're going to talk about Füllkrug in a fair bit of depth through this and extra time as well. But that change, bringing Füllkrug on, plus the reconfiguration of the attacking four, just worked really, really well. And I guess credit to Potter, but really biggest credit probably goes to Füllkrug, because he's been the missing piece, obviously.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things I noticed, which is such a minor thing to notice, but when we were going long, which obviously I'd prefer us to not have to do all the time, but when we were going long, instead of Bowen frankly just doesn't really win those duels. What you end up seeing is Souček being pushed up to try and contest those duels, and usually it's a 50-50 sort of thing, and if he does win it, there's not that much control over where the ball ends up. I think instantly, it might have even been Füllkrug's first touch, there's like a very controlled sort of header that goes exactly where he wants it. It sort of arrives in the space for the receiver to sort of run onto it and then play forward straight away, rather than what I think sometimes happens with Souček or other players is you might win the duel, but then the receiver afterwards is going into a second duel, because it's going into a second ball scenario where then they're having to win that contest. Whereas Füllkrug was sort of, throughout the game, just nodding it down to the player that was in the most space to sort of really make sure there wasn't even an opportunity for a second ball scenario, which really just helped us to sort of control possession even more comfortably in the second half, which I think was really impressive. And then, as we say, the change just more generally allowed for us to have such better coverage across the whole of the pitch, rather than sort of being like, oh yeah, Kudus is on the right, Bowen's going to peel off to the right, Paquetá we've given the licence to basically come over to the right if we decide we're going to go down the right, and Wan-Bissaka will come and sort of underlap or overlap, and then we've got four of our best players, in fact probably our four best players, certainly in sort of attacking contributions, all on one side. Whereas then you sort of bring Füllkrug on, you can drop Paquetá into the 10, you then can move Kudus out onto the left and have Bowen out on the right, and you've got your 4 best attacking players in 4 different zones of the pitch rather than one zone of the pitch, which I think, yeah, as you say, the sort of impact was super impressive. And the most obvious way to sort of analyse the impact is with the goals, right? Because I think both of them are, yeah, I think it's fair to sort of contribute or label both as being a result of these changes, almost directly, exactly. I would say.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. Even if Füllkrug is not involved directly, it's his introduction and the impact that he has on the players around him that's allowed these things to happen. The first goal is obviously from a corner, but we win the corner because Paquetá is able to come and sit in the right half space instead of having to be further over to the left. Bowen's freed up to make more incisive runs from out to in, which I think is his best run, where he starts wide and then diagonally runs inwards into the box. Enables that Lucas Paquetá dink that he tries all the time, but actually the conditions make sense for it now. You haven't got a straight runner into the box. It's on the diag, so he's actually free to receive. And if I'm honest, we probably should have scored directly from that. Bowen kind of messes up the pass across the box, but we win the corner and then we score directly from that. So that's sort of like +1 to Füllkrug, +3 to Potter, because really he's reconstructed the attack in a way that's allowed us to then go and create that chance. And then the second goal, I think, is the best demonstration of that variety, because you have Kudus freed up on the left to take on a player 1v1. And that's the exact variety we're talking about lacking. We didn't have anything out left to go and create a chance. And that's also exactly what you want from Kudus. That's all we're asking from him on the left. Get the ball, face up your man, take him on, produce something. And then Füllkrug's influence in the box on Bowen, I think, is probably the key thing to take away here, because a lot of Bowen's movement recently, I feel like has been easy to deal with for centre-backs, and it's because he is the sole focus of their of the centre-backs. But because Füllkrug's in there, what they're able to do is actually manipulate Dean Howson. So Dean Howson's obviously going to mark Füllkrug, and what Füllkrug does is just pull onto the back post. And then as he does that, Bowen runs around him and just in front, and therefore he's in front of Howson. Really good leap to get ahead of him. But yeah, just essentially, even though it won't say Füllkrug assist, Füllkrug has 40-50% created that goal just with his movement, and that is the effect right there. And the fact that we've seen it within 15-20 minutes, Bowen is suddenly exploding. He's looking like he's getting 3 or 4 chances, good chances as well, or getting close to getting them anyway. I just think it bodes really well to have these 4 finally fit. It's a shame that we're getting that at the end of the season, but still, it's nice to see that actually a lot of the ideas that we had around Füllkrug were not just based in giddy excitement. There was logic there. We did see the vision.
Yeah, we did. I think the second goal is, as you say, probably the one that most excited me. I think it was something that was discussed in the post-match press conference. Potter brought it up himself, and it was, as you can expect, a lot of the journos in the room were asking about Füllkrug and sort of the immediate impact that he had. And I think Potter was keen to discuss this. But as he often is in all of his press conferences, it's very team-focused. He doesn't really want to talk too much about any one individual. It's all about a collective effort, not just in terms of players digging in, but also in terms of how the relationships on the pitch work and sort of complement one another. And I think the complement of Füllkrug on Bowen is the one thing that he really pulled out. It was obviously Jarrod's done a great job in playing up front, but he's obviously much more comfortable out on that right-hand side where he can sort of pick up or identify those pockets of space and attack them. I think it's so funny because I think there was an assumption that Bowen would be great up top or capable up top because he scored 5-headed goals last season, and even though he's small, he's good in the air. But I think if you go back and watch those goals, so many of them are him sort of running at full belt onto a ball that's come into the box, and it's that sort of angle of approach that makes him good at heading, because it's not like a shoulder-to-shoulder contest between a centre-back. It's I'm arriving on your blind side and getting ahead of you, and that's so much more difficult for you to defend because you can't anticipate my movement because it's so good. And having someone like Füllkrug who demands the centre-back, or one of the centre-backs anyway, to go and take control of him, especially after Füllkrug scores the header from the corner, I think Hudson will have been like, all right, someone needs to pick up this guy because he's when Füllkrug scored, actually, sorry, this is a complete aside, but for anyone that wasn't there and missed it, I really need to let you in on it. But it was making me and the Bournemouth analyst that I was sat next to crack up, because when he scored, the stadium announcer just went, "He's big, he's German, it's Niclas Füllkrug." I was like, what on earth? Like, it was so funny, but it's also so true. And yeah, that had me chuckling. But yeah, it's true, and Howson would have had to go and sort of take control of that situation, and then that leaves Bowen just a sort of one guy to pick on and make sure that he can sort of time his runs and get there. And you see it straight away. Füllkrug's sort of taken Howson out of the equation. Bowen then picks his moment, as he did so well last season, running across from the corner of the box into that space and getting onto the cross. And yeah, great ball in from Kudus as well. Credit to him. It was a lovely delivery. But yeah, I just think it was such a nice sort of sign of what could come if Füllkrug can sort of start, and Potter was very reluctant to talk about how close he is to being able to start with his fitness, but even just if he's involved, it's going to be great. And I think you've already sort of said about the out to in runs, but Füllkrug being on the pitch also is a massive contributing factor to that as well, because he creates the space just by pinning the defence back.
Exactly.
Just by him being in the box, the defenders have to retreat 3 or 4 yards into their own box, which leaves that sort of corridor along the edge of the box that Bowen is so good at just running into. And you can see defenders terrified when they're sort of backpedaling and he's sort of standing them up. He's quite happy to just run all the way into the middle of the box if that's how long it takes for him to get his angle. He'll fake a shot until the defender sort of reacts and creates that tiny little window for him to wrap his foot around it. And you see him try it so many times in this game, and without a centre forward up there that creates those opportunities, that pulls the defenders away, he's not going to be able to do that. So yeah, I think all in all, as Potter was saying, it's not just about how exciting it is that Füllkrug's back, but it's about how exciting it is that Bowen is now going to relish the sort of opportunities that he gets, rather than being played through the centre almost exclusively. I suppose one of the other things that changed, this is a good moment for us to discuss it. Obviously, subs, Carlos Soler comes on. We discussed how our press didn't really function particularly well in the first half. And Soler comes on. Obviously, other players come on as well. Emerson's introduced at half time. Füllkrug comes on. But I think it was Soler in particular for me that meant that our press was a lot more effective. I certainly felt anyway in the second half. And it's not really surprising, because it's what we know about Soler, right? He's just, in terms of the way that he arrives and the way that he sort of swarms onto the receiving players that are receiving the ball and forces them to make decisions just that second quicker, meaning that they're not as comfortable in that decision, and then there's more opportunity for mistakes, and then there's more second ball battles in midfield. Whereas I think in the first half we were kind of getting overrun. I think Soler came in and really made it a lot more difficult for that Bournemouth midfield to play through.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's probably the thing we've seen most from him, the fact that he's a really good, or aggressive, supportive presser. And that certainly made a big impact. I think it helped us actually gain some upside from pressing. I think that the thing that made us press more effectively is probably doing less of it as well. I think we were more focused on picking certain triggers or moments to go and press, and that in combination with better personnel in the roles as well. For example, I don't massively love Souček in the first line of pressure. I just don't think he has the acceleration to be effective at all. So when we had Paquetá up there from the start of the second half, it already felt way better, that it was more intense. And then when Füllkrug went up there as well, I think he's probably, pound for pound is the wrong word, but I think he's probably the best presser in our squad. He just kind of gets his angles are better. I don't know how to explain it. His pressing angles are right
he
all the time.
Arcs his run more, doesn't he? So it's like he closes off a passing angle, whilst also then putting pressure on the.
Exactly.
So
he's forcing the pass. Yeah.
He stops the pass to the right centre back, let's say, by sort of curving his run out in front of that passing lane, but then follows through to Kepa to force him to pass it to exactly where he wants him, which is where the supporting pressure of someone like Paquetá or Soler goes, because in a well-functioning press, which it started to look like towards the end of the game, your teammates are anticipating, they know where you're trying to make Kepa pass the ball, and therefore that's where they're headed before the ball's even been played, so that then they can nip in front and steal it and create a chance.
Yeah, and it's it's good to see that that Füllkrug is also having an out of possession impact as well. Because I think, at least I know I'd not given up on the idea of us pressing, but I didn't think it was something I was going to see us do really well by the end of this season. I just didn't think the players had picked up enough or shown evidence that they picked up enough or learnt enough across the season. But maybe they just needed a focal point. Maybe they just needed a man to lead the line. Because I think the requisite jumps from there were really good. So yeah, it's good that even though we didn't get a win, I think in two aspects, in possession and out of possession, we've seen slight improvements, and that's always what I've wanted from Potter. We just see slight improvements game to game. So yeah, I'm really happy about it, to be honest. The only issue, I guess, would be they scored in the second half.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal. I guess as well, before we move on to that, the only thing I would flag is that whilst I agreed with the idea of removing Souček from the front line of the press for all the reasons that you've said, I think he is too slow. I think he's imposing. I think he is an imposing figure, but I think for any ball comfortable centre back, it's so easy to just wait, time it right, knock the ball to the side, because he's not blessed with the speed of movement that he can't just then react to that and jink his move out to the right. It's like, it's kind of like, I don't know, if a really, 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 really big ship was coming towards me, it's scary, but I back myself to just step to the side and let it go past because it's not coming at any real speed. But if it hits me, I'm going to be screwed. And I think centre-backs can kind of do that with him. Whereas I think with Paquetá, he's just got that little bit more pace and aggression that it just sort of scares centre-backs more, really. Yeah. And also, I think they know that Paquetá will quite happily just snap them if he's going to contest the duel, whether he's going to win it or not, which I think is a different kettle of fish altogether. But what I will say is I think there's probably a case to be made for one of Alvarez or Souček staying on, just because even though I think Soler's contribution to the press was beneficial, I think you could have had that and still had a bit of steel next to him in the midfield, because whilst I think it became more difficult for Bournemouth to play through the press, I think when they did get into the midfield third, we were just a little bit lightweight with the Ward-Prowse and Soler combination. I think you still need someone like a Souček and an Alvarez to be there to then contest those duels, because I think for all their strengths, we know that both Soler and James Ward-Prowse can be quite easily dribbled past in the middle. And I think that was something that we saw Bournemouth do quite a lot of. But as you say, the goal, we did concede. We shouldn't have, because I was absolutely furious that the free kick even got given. And again, the Bournemouth analyst sat next to me himself admitted that was a joke of a decision. And he joked and he was like, I bet we score from this now. And then they scored from it. And I was like, you prick, you have done us there. But you still have to defend those situations, right? That's not to say that we don't deserve to concede it, because, okay, we conceded the free kick, switch on, now defend the free kick. The ball is miles away from the goal. But Kilman, we've sung his praise a lot throughout the course of this season. I think he's been one of our best players all season, frankly. But on this occasion, incredibly disappointing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing from Kilman's perspective, but I also think it speaks to a wider point that's been an issue for at least the last couple of games, really all season, along our back line, which is communication. There's not a leader in our back line, in goalkeeper included as well. I can think of 2 or 3 instances just from this game, outside of the goal, where the lack of communication across the back line has just made us look a little bit, I don't know, sometimes even a little bit amateur. There's a moment in the first half where the ball should be Areola's. The ball is rolling through to Areola, but Wan-Bissaka obviously doesn't get a shout. So he slips in front of Areola, takes the ball basically out of his hands and dribbles to the right-hand side. If one of you just said a word, really the goalkeeper should have just said a word, it would have been fine. And it seems like for the goal, the backline were just not on the same page, because Kilman dropped, kept everyone on. All the others were in a line a little bit higher. If Kilman had kept the line, would have been offside. He didn't keep the line, and Wan-Bissaka had just completely lost Evanilson because he was trying to play offside, and therefore Evanilson was free to knock it in at the back post. Really disappointing, because outside of that, our second half was so good. I think we played so well. And and it's a crap goal to concede. Let's be honest. It's not one that you can go, oh, well done, Bournemouth. You've played really well. They took a quick free kick, and we've sort of just let it happen. We just weren't alert to it. Yeah, a shame. I don't want to end it on that sour note or conclude things on the sour note because I think the performance was really good on the whole. I'm happy with it. But yeah, it's just not the kind of goal that we should be conceding, us particularly, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we don't have to end on a sour note because I think, as you say, the second half was overwhelmingly impressive, I would say. I think we were the better team in the second half. And I think when you take... I know it's dumb analysis, but when you take out that goal, which was a stupid mistake from a free kick that shouldn't have existed anyway, so I think it's fine to sort of add that caveat. But when you take that out, they created nothing, really. They really didn't pose much of a threat at all. I think it was 0.19 XG in the second half, and a good chance is generally seen as being 0.15 XG and above, so it's one good chance and a bit, and that was probably spread over several chances as well. So really, it's a handful of low quality chances that we've given to them, then a huge mistake that leads to the goal. But yeah, I think it highlights a really important point because Kilman is obviously going to start for us next season, but we know that he's not the most vocal of centre-backs. Generally, you see it on the pitch. He's not really someone who's screaming and shouting. I'm sure he is marshalling his backline to an extent, but I think we've made it clear that a new goalkeeper needs to come in the summer for a whole plethora of reasons. But I think one of them, maybe one of the most important ones, is that we need someone to come in and be vocal at the back, because Areola's not. Fabianski was more than Areola, but still not really. Kilman's not. Todibo hasn't shown to be that, and you can probably imagine that he starts next season once we've spent all that money on him. So where is it coming from? If you've got your centre-back partnership locked in already, and neither of them are particularly vocal leaders, albeit good players, it has to be the goalie, really. It has to be the goalie, because Wan-Bissaka's going to start, and I suppose you could go and get a left-back who's a vocal leader, but realistically, the way that we know that Potter's going to want to use that left-back, particularly if Wan-Bissaka's more defensive-minded, albeit he's shown that he's quite good attacking, your left-back's going to be up the pitch for a lot of the time. So the idea that your left back is going to be the guy that leads your defence and marshals the defence when half the time he's in the final third just doesn't really wash. He's not going to be in those duels in the way that the centre backs are on the last line. So yeah, I think a very vocal goalkeeper will be a crucial addition. But if we wanted to land on a positive, I guess to wrap it up, is to bring it back round to sort of the importance of having a proper number 9. Right, I think it's just going to make Bowen look so much better. I think it should allow Paquetá to thrive because there's someone for his often hero-looking balls to actually stick to. He's got a target to focus for now, someone that can sort of split and stretch the back line and make runs in behind and drop in and facilitate play, which is something that we didn't actually discuss really about Füllkrug. Perhaps we'll do that in extra time. So yeah, please do come over and join us there. But yeah, someone who can drop, link up, and play balls in behind himself, as well as making those runs, I think is really, really valuable when you've got two big goal scorers on either flank in Kudus and Bowen, both of whom love to make those runs in behind. So having a 9 that can spot them as well as a 10 is really good. But I suppose I will use that as an advert for extra time. We said we'll do individual performances, but obviously lacking was final third creation, even though it was improved in the second half, and we will be looking at a number of exciting sort of number 10s/wingers that we could bring in the summer to sort of aid that final third. Staleness, I guess, is kind of the right word. I would say it's not like really bad, it's just a little bit stale and you need a little bit of verve and flair in there. So yeah, we'll be going through some of those players, so please do join us there. But yeah, I think ultimately, Darcy, I think we can take some positives. I think the vibe after the game was overwhelmingly negative. I've seen a lot of Potter out stuff. I've seen a lot of people moaning about how bad all the players are. And I think it's our job to remind people that it really isn't that bad. We were bad defensively when Potter arrived. We were bad at building up when Potter arrived. And we looked okay in attack, but still weren't great. And it was at the expense of goals at the other end. It was like for every goal we scored, we'd probably concede 2 or 3. He's come in, he's made the defence a hell of a lot better. He's made us more possession comfortable in such a short space of time. We saw how well we retained possession against one of the best pressing units in Europe. And we saw for 45 minutes that the final third stuff can work once you've actually got the players in the right positions. And if Füllkrug can stay fit, or if we can go and find a number 9 that can do what Füllkrug does, that's more reliable, and you can have Paquetá in the 10, and you can have Bowen in his preferred right wing slot, and you can have Kudus attacking and running at defenders and getting to the byline and putting crosses in like he does for the assist, it can function. We've just been very unlucky because we've not been able to see that a lot, because of injuries, because of various issues. But we've seen it now, and we've seen that it works. And I think the right approach was to start from the back and build up, rather than trying to fix a front three that was actually okay anyway. So yeah, there's the positive spin. There's the thing to take away. Remember, don't boo your own players. It's not a great place to be. And also, it's really not that bad. Like, we're not Southampton. I'm sorry, Southampton. You're getting shots fired at you this week, but you have just sacked your manager today after what has been an atrocious campaign. I'd understand if we were Southampton fans. I'd understand booing then. But this is the very early stage of a new era under Potter, and I think the building blocks are being put in place, and you can see the shoots of positivity. And once he spends a bit of money on this squad and gets some players in, I do feel genuinely quite positive. So yeah, Darcy, any final comments? If not, it's a come on you irons, and we'll see you all hopefully on the Patreon for the preview.
I think come on you irons, and join us on the Patreon. You can hear whatever I had stored in my brain. Saving it for there.
Thanks guys, thanks for listening as always, and we'll see you very soon.